Snowflake and AWS recently did a talk at the Snowflake Summit that just blew my mind, really, about what's possible with machine learning that you can now use as a commodity product rather than it being custom, and how this potentially democratizes the access to machine learning. It was pretty amazing to me, and others may not be as excited, but I was pretty blown away. So the title for this is really SageMaker Autopilot. Is it enabling machine learning as a commodity? And really, in my mind, what I saw in this was this is accelerating the machine learning revolution. And I don't understand how people can justify pouring a lot of money into a custom platform for people that are using the Amazon cloud. This feels like it eliminates the need for custom machine learning platforms. A high percentage of people's use cases can now be done with a commodity platform with less investment, less platform building, and lower startup costs. You still got to know how to use AWS service, but it was pretty mind-blowing. So the other part of this demonstration was accessing open data, combining that with proprietary data, feeding that to a machine learning algorithm, and then deploying that and running that algorithm. Now, in production, you have one more work to do, but from a demonstration point of view, it was all done with maybe 20 lines of code, maybe 10 lines of code. It was pretty crazy. So let me just talk about this demo, and I'll show you the link, and then you can watch it yourself, hopefully. So the pilot was pretty interesting. It was a COVID data set, and they were trying to figure out if you could prioritize intake for COVID patients based on historical information and build an algorithm that would tell you to prioritize your list. So here, what they did was they pulled in Snowflake public data about mortality and other issues with different signs that people had and what their outcomes look like, and a set of initial intake surveys. And they bound that into a set of features, and they spun up a SageMaker Autopilot. And that Autopilot basically found an algorithm, trained the algorithm, tuned the algorithm, and generated a model that seemed to line up with that data. Hey, here's the intake data. For this intake data, what would their outcome have been? And then it deployed it as a web service. And it basically did that with like 2 lines of code. It was crazy on the SageMaker side. And the Snowflake side was no slacker either. It was like 3 lines of code. And then after they deployed it, they basically took that same public data. They brought in new individual surveys as a demonstration. They combined those into features basically inline. And you could either do it in batch or streaming. And then they basically fed that to the deployed endpoint from the first step. And then the outcome of that would be some manual action, right? Like, do we bring this person in immediately? Do we intubate them? I don't even know what that means, but it sounds cool, right? I just really think this was pretty amazing. It was a demonstration of public and private data and machine learning and training without actually having to stand anything up or do custom deployments or any of that type of stuff, all the way to an endpoint where you could call it. Now, to productionize it, you had more work to do, but to see whether it was going to work, it was a 10-minute demo, and I thought it was really cool. So the interesting part of this to me that they did was they restructured and merged the data sets inside Snowflake with simple SQL. Then they created an ML environment by calling, just with a template. They created an AWS SageMaker environment. And then they created and trained the model by calling the endpoints for SageMaker, and that picked the algorithm and picked the hyperparameters that made that work. And they deployed the model as an endpoint, and then they demonstrated that that model worked by making a remote call, in this case from inside of Snowflake, but you could have done it anywhere. So I highly recommend you go look at this recording. And they did a good job of presenting it, but in some ways, I think it wasn't inherently obvious, kind of the amazing things that were happening onto this. So I'll put the link in the video and on the blog, and I hope that's useful to you. And go check it out. It is pretty amazing where machine learning is going.